Why has he got the Falcon Northwest gaming machine out, the Tiki with the 5090? They can fit a 5090 in there. It's so tiny. Well, it's because we got to take this thing for a spin at 240 hertz. It's an OLED. I saw this at Computex. This was one of the most exciting things that I saw at Computex. Let's see if it lives up to the hype. One of the things that I really like about this box is that it has excellent repackability. It even has some hints on the flap to help you unpack. Alrighty, in the box there are a lot of accessories. We have an 8K labeled DisplayPort cable, a USB Type-C cable, an HDMI cable, HDMI 2.1 with the label, a USB 3 Type A to B cable, and then the declaration of conformance along with a color calibration report, a factory color calibration report. I love this. I mean, at this price point, you kind of have this expectation, but it's like, yes, this was done with a Minolta Color Analyzer CA410, grayscale and gray tracking, sRGB Delta E 0.46. The PG032UFS helps enable ultra smooth color gradation. Nice. I mean, it's a gaming display, but this is really awesome. It also comes with this little, the cable sock, and you can organize all of your stuff that goes in here. So 2 DisplayPort connections, 2 HDMI connections. You got a bunch of Type A ports. You got power, headphone, and microphone, as well as Type C. Now, I think there's something special. Let's see if they went through with this on the connections. Because you get the Type C connection, and then you get the Type B connection, and you can use that as kind of a KVM, but there's multiple sets of Type A connections. This is your Wi-Fi antenna. It has the standard SMA connector. There's a lot of motherboards that have the quick disconnect now. I wish that the motherboards came with an adapter to adapt from the quick disconnect to the standard RPSMA, but this is an RPSMA to RPSMA cable. The monitor has built-in Wi-Fi antennas that are actually quite good. You should, if you're using wireless, my condolences, a wired connection would be a lot better, but you can use the connection through the monitor, and the antennas that are in the monitor are generally better than the antenna that you have with the, that came with the card, came with your wireless card. Now, OLED is a panel technology. If you're not familiar, each pixel emits light. It's very good. And if you're interested in comparing monitors across the whole universe of possible monitor options, I got to plug the Arting's website. They know what they're doing. They're doing long-term tests. I like OLED, so I've actually bought a lot of OLED displays. ASRock sent me this one at my request, and I'm going to test it because I saw it at Computex. But I've also done comparison on other OLED displays. And we'll talk about this display in comparison with the other ones because I've got some more mileage with the other ones, and it's been a little interesting. Assembling the stand is this easy, about 15 degrees. Then you got a height adjustable stand with a quick disconnect. And this is your antenna inputs, and then your antennas on the side here. Now the cable sock that's included with this one is extra large. You zip this together, and this will help you hide all of your cables. This also has an external power brick. Let's see what we're dealing with. 240 watts. 240 watts is a lot of power. That's it for the accessories. Now this does have a standard 100mm VESA mount at the back here. It is recessed, so some mounting hardware doesn't have good clearance. You might have to use longer screws or standoffs or plastic washers, but you can see that you do have standard 100mm VESA mounting screws. The panel itself is quite light. And boom, that's all you gotta do. Controls for this is a 5-way hat switch at the back with 2 dedicated buttons. One for on-off and one for, I think, quick input select. Wow, the manufacturing date on this says 2024 11/11. Taking that long to get the software just right and do the burn-in testing and make sure that ASRock can offer the extended warranties on these, because OLED displays do wear. Each pixel emits light, so they'll wear unevenly depending on how the display is used. That has to be managed in software, and the software has to be really good. One of the first things I like to test is how does this display respond when you maximize and minimize windows, because if you have a light screen or a dark screen, it can tend to make the overall display lighter or darker. You see a lot of complaints about this online. You see this especially with LG displays or TVs that have been adapted into monitor displays. So just maximizing and minimizing windows to look for color shift or brightness shift doesn't seem to be happening on this display on the out-of-the-box settings. That's fantastic. Just going into the on-screen display, it warns you. It's like, this may change energy consumption. Yes, we absolutely want to change energy consumption. This is one of the, like, Energy Star is not even a thing in America. There's been a change. And that's not necessarily, like, that's a whole other thing to get into. But there were certain really bizarre energy usage requirements that made good kinds of display technology more unavailable. Like, this kind of display technology is going to use a lot of power as compared with some other alternatives on the market. But that doesn't mean you should punish this kind of display technology because it's so easy on your eyes. It's so beautiful. It's so good. And yes, it's going to use more power. And you can't just have blanket regulations for things that, square peg, round hole type problems. But this is a really interesting way to get around it. And I'm sorry for the engineers that had to build it. There's lots of gaming assist features in here, including sniper mode, where you can magnify the middle of the display or what's in the center of the display to make it easier to see what's going on. I mean, if you're playing an online game, technically, I guess this would be cheating, but there's not really a way to detect this kind of cheating because it's built into the display. And as a Linux user, this makes me, I laugh at this kind of thing because there are certain game companies that don't want you to be able to play a game under Linux because cheating. And it's like, I got some news for you. That ship has sailed. The on-screen menu is competent and full of features. There is an RGB feature at the back of the monitor. You can disable that or enable that through the on-screen display. It also supports picture-in-picture and picture-by-picture, a couple of different modes there. OLED care, so it'll keep track of OLED. You can also set the display to automatically turn itself off in case you forget and leave it on and you don't have your computer set for power save. The screen can say, I've been on for 8 hours continuously. They're probably not still there, and just shut off automatically. You can also set much shorter intervals, like 30 or 45 minutes or an hour or whatever, but those seem absurdly short, but you can set it for, longer intervals as well. I like very much that this display treats picture-in-picture and picture-by-picture separately. It actually gives you a few more different controls in order to be able to arrange the pictures however you want. The KVM control is a little clunky, but it does also have a USB software update option. So you can use the FAR type A port with a firmware image and upgrade the firmware for the display. And this is critically important. In terms of how does this stack up for the other displays, that's kind of the lead into my next point. The Asus display, this is the first OLED monitor that I took a look at. It's a little long in the tooth. It's been replaced by another model, but as by way of comparison, this monitor and the Aorus FOU32 are superior, I think, to what Asus was offering for the Butter for Your Eyes monitor. If you didn't check out that review, you should check out that review. One of the hilarious bugs that is lingering with the firmware on that is that if you are trying to run the display at a low brightness, that will extend OLED panel lifetime in general. That's true of all OLED displays. The problem is that if you set it below a certain point, when the display is idle, it'll auto dim. The auto dim brightness is brighter than the minimum brightness that I like to run on. So there are several people complaining about that. I know Alan Malventano has a ticket older than mine complaining about exactly the same issue. And it's very easy to replicate. You can do a video of it, and it's been unfixed for like 6+ months. And this doesn't do that, at least not right now. Of course, the Butter for Your Eyes monitor didn't do that either with the launch firmware, but it had some bugs. And so if you want to get the bugs fixed, you've got a whole other set of bugs to deal with. So this doesn't do that. This is a little more polished. And again, it's like we've been able to manufacture the displays since 2024, apparently, almost a year, and they've been working on the software and the longevity, all that stuff that we saw at Computex. And so it's nice to see that. It's nice to see that in this display. And like the other two displays, I'm going to daily drive them because they're such nice panels. It really is butter for your eyes. And you'll be hearing from me as to how I progress with the different displays and configurations. I mean, to be sure, they're all three very nice. There's no problems. There's no burn-in like that. It's just, some little minor quirks here and there. But so far, this doesn't have the quirks that I've experienced. The Aorus model has also been holding up fine. It doesn't have the firmware bugs. But it'll be interesting to see how the ASRock model with its 240 Hz native configuration. Oh, and that's you can do that through display stream compression. DisplayPort 1.4 can do that. Some displays like LG will label it DisplayPort 2.1 when in fact it is actually DisplayPort 1.4 with mandatory display stream compression. It's compressing the signal. Technically speaking, display stream compression is an optional part of DisplayPort 1.4 specification, but out the gate for the lowest signaling bitrate for DisplayPort 2.1, DSC becomes required. And so with this at 4K, 240 hertz display stream compression. Also HDMI. And so with the HDMI connection, boom, 240 hertz on this display through HDMI, which that alone is going to be worth the price of admission for some of you. Just keep in mind display stream compression. That is a toggle in the monitor you can toggle off, because that does introduce compatibility issues with some older hardware, some game consoles. So you can toggle that off in the OSD, which is great. Let's do some gaming tests. Now, one of the obvious use cases is using a laptop or a portable device via the USB-C connection. Some of these displays support charging. It's usually a pretty modest charging setup, under 100 watts. Typically, it's only really reliable for like 75 watts. So that's going to take out a lot of possible laptops. So, I try a selection of laptops and operating systems. It's pretty easy to get this into a situation where you've got USB device not recognized. And that does not seem to be down to the cable that ASRock bundled, the USB Type-C cable, although there are definitely better USB Type-C cables that you can get for this use. The only way to recover when the monitor gets into this state from USB device not recognized is to pull the power brick and let it sit for about 10 or 15 seconds and then plug it back in. How you get into this state in the first place? Well, sometimes that can involve Linux. Sometimes that can involve trying to use a really high refresh. Now, USB-C, when you've got USB and DisplayPort running over the same wire, it's only going to use two of the pair, and the other two pair are used for USB signals. And so it can be a little problematic getting that to work properly, because it's a shared bandwidth medium. This is not necessarily ASRock's fault. It's maybe an Icarus factor. They're flying too close to the sun. There are similar issues on the other OLED displays that I've tested that have a USB-C input, where, the bandwidth, the sharing, you're not going to get 240 hertz reliably necessarily via the USB-C connection. Don't expect that. Can you do 4K 120? In some scenarios, yes, but you might be limited to USB 2.0 speeds. It would be nice to have explicit control over that in the on-screen display. Like, yes, run in USB 2 mode, but give us full DisplayPort 1.4 via USB-C. It's a little hit and miss. And you can see once the display is rebooted, oh, look, the laptop and everything's working properly. After a reboot here with our picture-in-picture, our Falcon Northwest Tiki is the smaller picture, and they're both sending 4K absurd refresh, 240 hertz in the case of the Tiki. And notice on our USB-C connection, I think ASRock knows this is a little bit of an issue. They actually limit you to 160 hertz. But really, I'm telling you, like 100, 120 hertz is going to be far more reliable. And that's just the nature of the beast when you're dealing with USB-C. That's 120 hertz or less. Less is always more reliable. Well, almost always. Now, for the picture-by-picture mode, I was hoping that ASRock could put a little bit more work into it, because you could divide the display into quadrants. It has 2 HDMI and 2 DisplayPort and a USB Type-C. Maybe I could have, 4 displays, 4 things being displayed at once. I would even be happy if in that mode, it sets it to 1080p. So 1080p, 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 1080p from 4 different inputs. That would be amazing. It doesn't do that, at least as far as I can tell. Now, does this function as a USB switch? Yes, although USB 2.0, ideally, because of the display, from the USB-C side, and then USB 5 gigabit from the Type B input. And depending on which input is active, if the USB-C input is active, it will switch the USB Type A, the 3 Type A ports, over with the Type B connector on the bottom of the monitor, or on the back of the monitor. So right now I've got our awesome Keychron K10H with the wood grain accents plugged in. This kind of reminds me of like an old TRS-80 type keyboard. But we can see that, this works pretty well through the display. And then if I switch to the Tiki and I've got a USB Type B cable from the monitor to the computer, then my keyboard will run through the monitor to the computer and the keyboard and the mouse will switch. This is pretty awesome. In terms of being able to charge the laptops that I have here need so much power that charging through USB-C is not going to be a thing. If you had like a 65 watt laptop, it might be okay, but generally I wouldn't count on that. And then you can just be pleasantly surprised if it happens to work in your particular scenario. Oh, the monitor also has some built-in, it's like 7.5-ish watt speakers. They're not bad. They're not great, but they're not bad. So if you need built-in sound on your monitor to just hear beeps and boops, they're not bad. They'll get the job done. Now you can't see it from this shot, but from the high-speed shot you can. And oh, this is so glorious. One square on at a time, 240 hertz refresh. The pixels can turn on and off that fast. I love OLED. I love OLED. OLED. Yeah, I love it. It's just such a good display panel technology, except for the whole wear out thing. But ASRock, with the long warranty, it's going to be great, just like we saw at Computex. Now that I've had a bit of fun with this panel, let's take a look at its actual specifications. We're going into a little bit more detail about the specifications. This is WOLED, so white LED plus regular OLED. And you can kind of see that on the text scrolling. If you look at the text scrolling sharpness, it really caught my eye. I really like how good it looks with the full black and white scrolling. It's a nice experience at a high refresh rate when you're looking at high contrast things. It is display HDR, True Black 400, True Black because it's kind of cheating. Every pixel emits light, so the pixels can just turn off and it doesn't get any blacker than, no light coming from it. So that's nice. The coating on it is also pretty nice. It's not full matte, but it's also not full gloss. It's sort of an in-between display coating, and I find myself liking the display coating more than I thought I would. It has a 0.03 milliseconds gray-to-gray response time, and as far as I can tell, that's accurate. 99% DCI-P3, 132% sRGB color space. It is FreeSync Premium Pro, though that does come off by default in the on-screen display. You'll want to toggle that on if you want that. You can also drop it down to full HD 480 Hz mode. So if you want to run it at 1080p 480 Hz, you can do that. The brightness is 275 nits typical with up to 1300 nits in the HDR peak. That's peak brightness when it's in HDR mode. It can use upwards of 200 watts, even if you're not using the 65 watt USB-C charging. So like 180 watts on max brightness. Now, if you turn the brightness all the way down, you can get it under 100 watts at what I think is a reasonable brightness. Basically, if you're not using this thing in sunlight, it'll be fine. At the time that I'm doing this video, the latest firmware is from 5/28 of 2025. That's May 28th. Basically the Computex edition of the firmware. And if this is a display panel you're thinking about buying, and I suggest you check out the manual and look at the features in the manual and the cool stuff in the manual. ASRock's done a pretty reasonable job putting this thing together. I like it, and playing games on it is a lot of fun. But that's no reason not to comparison shop. I mean, OLED is a significant price to enter, but it's also a significantly different kind of display. And once you've experienced it in real life and you have a display that, this is the display standard we should all aspire to. I'm not necessarily specifically talking about OLED, like just the display experience. Like OLED gives you a display experience that all other display technologies should aspire to. Or let's fix the display wear thing so that you can have a 100-year-old OLED panel that looks just as good as the day that it rolled off the line. They're getting better all the time, but OLED really is, it's in my brain. I can feel it. I love it. It's fantastic. I'm here for all the OLED innovation. How about this level 1 has been a quick look at the PG032UFS from ASRock. 32 inches, 4K, ultra high refresh. What's not to love? It's my perfect monitor that I've been wishing for like 5 years. And it's finally mainstream and not $5,000.